Educate yourself and understand the rules, because no one's coming to save you. It's on you. No one is responsible for your financial education. No one is responsible for your finances, even if you have, quote, a fiduciary. Why do we spend so much time focusing on when I'm 65 and almost no time talking about what if I don't make it to 65? It's a failure of the financial planning industry. If you don't know exactly where your capital is and who's using it and how they're using it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Remnant Finance. We are doing another solo episode today. We got the privilege of speaking with Brian last week with the big old beard, trying to blend over there in the Middle East. And that was great getting to catch up with him. Still no timeline on when he's going to be back. So we're pressing on. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And hopefully we can get him back on more in the future. Today, I want to talk about banking. I want to talk about what banking is, and not in the deep level, not in the textbook definition. You know, if you like the Encyclopedia of Central Banking that I refer to in our Know Your Enemy series, where I want people to get acquainted with the mechanics of banking. We're not exposed to this, what fractional reserve banking is, or now the lack of fractional reserve banking. You know, even like fiat money versus, quote, sound money, government edicts, how money comes to be. There's a long kind of rabbit trail that people go down, typically starting with The Creature from Jekyll Island. You read that book and you realize that we've been duped, that this system is not for our benefit, and the system, you know, is designed to extract the fruits of your labor. However, we at the top of the food chain, as far as the Eurodollar system, i.e. not euros as in Europe, but the Eurodollar system, i.e. dollars outside of the American economy, and other nations depending on them, we're at the top of the food chain for that. Individually, we might not feel that way relative to our own banking system here, relative to the Federal Reserve, right? We see this big gap between us, quote, us and them. However, the rest of the world is in line for dollars behind us. And so we do benefit from this. And so while the system is not for our benefit, we do benefit from it. But beyond that, beyond just understand, you know, by the idea of how the Treasury and the Fed interact, how the government, Congress, I think, is the root cause of the problem with their spending, how they monetize the debt via the Treasury, and then, you know, the Fed goes from being the lender of last resort to now basically just forward guidance. They are pretty much, if there's any little blip in the economy, we're just going to step in, paper it over, right? So totally off the rails. I agree that, you know, the Fed should end, but if it's not going to end, and don't sit around waiting for it to end. Instead, educate yourself and understand the rules and understand how you can optimize for your family, right? Because no one's coming to save you. It's on you. No one is responsible for your financial education. No one is responsible for your finances, even if you have, quote, a fiduciary. That term is it's kind of stupid in my opinion. You need to take control of this yourself, and you need to learn the ins and outs, not necessarily the ins and outs of banking as far as what are all these acronyms that the Fed uses when it's all just QE by a different name. You know, what even is QE? Understanding M1, M2, the different types of money, how it's measured, all of that stuff I think is important to know, because you should be the banker for your family. But at the end of the day, this one's going to be more conceptual. It's going to be kind of like, let's just go big picture. And I want to read from Nelson Nash's Become Your Own Banker about the problem and the solution, about what banking is and how we can, quote, build our own bank. And so that's what we're going to cover today. But just an unfortunate another plug, and I feel like I just did this a month ago, but I hate when we are, our efforts are proven to be accurate or not, are proven to be necessary in the most tragic ways. Yesterday, as of this recording day, there was a crash at an Air Force base in California, and one of the guys in our group, our pilot mandate group, was on the plane. And so that is an example of conversations that I've had about what we do, the strategy that we put in place, the general financial strategy and order of operations that we try to convey to clients, and setting up that, you know, that banking system as we're going to talk about today. And the conversation just never really went anywhere. And that happens pretty frequently, unfortunately. There's a little bit of interest, but then basically I kind of like this idea, but then wait a second, you're talking about life insurance, I'm out. And that's what happened here. And I I never want to. It's always hard to talk about this within our group because I don't want to come across as trying to exploit this or trying to make this a business. I mean, I hate even saying the words, but I understand that this being our business and us having a pretty big footprint in that group, having a lot of clients in our pilot mandate resistance group, we have a large body of our or a large percentage of our clients are from that group, and so we're very active in there. We talk about what we do openly. I think everyone needs it, or at least needs to deeply explore it. But in a situation like this, which unfortunately is not infrequent, I I never want to say like, hey, you guys need to get on my calendar, or someone who does generally what I do, someone in the IBC community, someone who, or just even your own financial advisor, and push them. If you don't have adequate life insurance protection, you need to push them. Hey, why do I not have this protection in place? At a minimum, at least that term coverage. I mean, if they're the typical financial planner, they're at least pushing you on term, which in this case is certainly would have been a very, hopefully it's in place, but that's a very valuable. I mean, this is exactly when that is needed, right? The 1% of term that ever pays out. If you're that 1%, God forbid, you want to have that in place. But there should be like, hey, why have we never had this conversation? Why do we spend so much time focusing on when I'm 65 and almost no time about talking about what if I don't make it to 65? So I don't assume you're not going to be the statistic. The number of people that we have interacted with and had conversations with who say that's interesting and move on, not from a business perspective. It's sad from a perspective of when these things happen, we don't know what's in place. And so I know that this was something that piqued, that the interest was piqued, and life insurance was the deciding factor as to why we were not going to move forward with this strategy. And that's very, very unfortunate. And that is it's a failure of the financial planning industry. That's a success of the marketing by Wall Street. If you think about what the typical brokerage or financial institution got out of that time frame of this man's life, they made a lot more money, and they don't return any more than what was earned by this individual. So they're going to be giving his wife, of course, it's going to go through probate. Like there's all these contingencies, right? It's going to be unlimited spousal deduction, but still, like, he has an estate that now has to be measured, the will in place, and so there's all these things that are going to come into play now. But at the end of the day, the financial institutions are only going to give exactly what that money grew to, and that money grew to where it did with his own money. Like when we invest our own money, and if it grows, we get those gains. But it's not like we put in money and they match us and they're giving up some of their money. Like, unlike a life insurance contract where they would be paying many, many, many times over tax free to his wife right now. And so it's not the end all be all. It's not just that you buy life insurance and chill. But at the same time, conversely, it's not that you just go long equities and chill, because we need to be prepared for this. And so if you are listening to this and if you've never seriously broached that estate planning conversation, what exactly do I have? Who exactly is it going to? And how is it getting there? How much of this is earmarked for the government? All of those questions, if you haven't thought about that, please don't assume anything. Don't assume that you're not the statistic. Like, you need to do this. And so I, I'm not gonna make a case for everyone getting on my calendar within our group. But how many times do we need to have the conversation of who's going to set up the GoFundMe? Do we know, like, how can we support? Like, how you can support when it comes to you is setting yourself up to not be in the situation where people ask about GoFundMe's. And so it's tragic. And you know, we can pray that he had adequate protection in place. We can pray for his family, um, and just please don't leave this to, I'm not going to be the 1% that a term policy would pay out for. What that means, the reason term is priced so cheaply, is because almost everyone, 99% of people, are going to outlive it. That means that most people are going to make it to retirement age. You're going to make it past the point where those terms drop off. So we can loosely overlay that with most people are going to live another, are going to live for a long time. But if you're not that one, please take this as an invitation, or as an urging you should feel a calling, especially as a father. I mean, talking to one of my friends just now, who asked, "Hey, was he a client? Did you have anything set up?" And unfortunately, the answer is no. Not that I know of. We were just saying, man, like, can you imagine in that instance, a plane takes off and clear something's wrong, right back to the runway, and it's just a crater. In that situation, of course you're thinking of your wife and kids, and uh, how much more awful than it already is, knowing this is it. If you have that time, I mean, if you have the time to think, we don't know how the mishap actually played out yet, but I mean, thinking about being ill prepared in this area, it doesn't make it easier or any less. It doesn't make it any less difficult, but it's certainly, I can't even imagine. And so please don't leave that to chance. Please have a conversation. We're not just going to sell you something to try, like, for business. If what we do as a strategy, whole life, thinking about how we talking about the banking system, if that doesn't make sense for you, we're not going to put you in that product. We'll get you a term policy. At least have a term policy if you are that 1%. I mean, I don't think that the buy term and invest the difference is a solid long-term strategy, not knowing the future with uncertainties that might happen. However, in this case, that would have been a very strong play, because had we known that yesterday was his last day, we would want to get as much coverage as possible for as little premium as possible. And so in that case, yeah, with 50-50 hindsight knowledge, if you're that 1%, term is the actually the best possible play. And so let's pray that he had that in place. But have a conversation with us, even if we have no intention of doing the strategies we implement. We just like talking through this, and we want to make sure you're protected, particularly if you're in our network. Like, we're not salesmen in the sense of like everything for a sale. Like, we do business, and we work with people that this makes sense for, who want it and who want to go through their education process. But if that's not you, that doesn't mean we can't have a conversation and to make sure that let's poke all the holes we can, and let's check the bucket for holes and make sure there's nothing that's going to leak out here. And I don't want to keep having these. The fact that we're losing a war right now, which is mostly being fought in the air, probably contributes to the fact that it seems like there are an absurd number of aircraft mishaps this year. I have not looked at any stats or data, but even removing what's going on in the Middle East and the huge number of aircraft losses over there, it feels like here every week or every 2 weeks we're seeing, F-18 falls from the sky here, 35 goes down here. Like, it feels way more common this year. And I don't know I don't know if it's actually true, or if it's just that being in the aviation community still, I see this more often, but even within that community, it feels like it's happening more. So have a conversation with your wife. Make sure she knows what you're leaving her. And if you're not satisfied with that, or if she's not satisfied with that, let's have a conversation about how we can fix that. And there's different ways we can do it. So that's my urge to you again. And I really feel like I just had the same plea a couple weeks ago. But this is not the first in our small group here. This is not the first this year of healthy guys who have died and left families behind. So please don't let that be you. All right, I'm going to talk about banking, and I'll go back to a lot of us, and I think most of our audience does not like the Fed. I think that's a fair statement. If you've tuned in and resonate with our messaging, you don't like the Fed, and I get that. Hopefully, you recognize that we do get a lot of value out of the Fed, in that our standard of living is not commensurate with the value that we provide as far as our actual labor output, right? The fact that you can have pretty much anyone with a job in America can afford a car and a house, and afford might be a loose word, but can be in a car and a house, and even if perhaps their payments are just subsuming them. But compared to most of the world, we are in a very fortunate spot as far as the line for dollars goes. When you understand how the game works, you can be angry about it, but being angry doesn't pay the bills. Understanding it, learning it, adapting to the system that we're in, that's what pays the bills. Do you want the system to be fair? Yeah, of course. Do you want it to be fixed? Yes. Do you want the Fed to end? Yeah, but don't sit around and wait for that. What you need to do is you need to know the rules, and you need to know the rules that banks play by. That's what we want to talk about today. What does a bank do loosely, and how can we take that in principle? Like, the depth of banking and banking processes is enormous. And we're just going to take an iceberg sliver of the top just to kind of take very loose analogies and metaphors. And we want to just distill it into a process that we can actually apply in a framework. Because I've read a lot of books about the banking system and about the mechanics of it, like not the creature from Jekyll Island, kind of engaging material, like the dry textbooks. It gets I don't understand how anyone fully grasps all of it. It's just so in depth and detailed and specific, and it makes military acronyms seem like it's insane, right? We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to go that level, but I just want to talk about what does the bank do. So, like, if you're earning 3% in your bank account and you're paying 6% on a loan to the same bank, you're basically paying 3% to borrow your own money. A lot of the points I'm going to make today, you're already doing these things. Like banking already exists and it's already happening in your life. So if there is a way that you could learn and apply knowledge that would allow you to profit from that instead of the other entities who are currently actively profiting from it, whether you understand this or not, like why would you not want to explore it? So I'm going to read some from Nelson Nash, and I'm just going to kind of talk through some thoughts here, but I'll start with my perception first. When I talk about banking, we always say the banking function, and what does that actually mean? Right? We're not trying to start a bank here. We're not getting a charter to start a bank, and that's some of what I'm going to read in Nelson's book. But just if I had to make it one sentence, it's understanding and managing and optimizing the flow of capital in and out of your life. Money's going to keep flowing in, and money's going to keep flowing out. But in between those two realities, what happens to it? Is it just a straight shot? The analogy I like to use sometimes is if you have a river running through your property, you could catch fish, right? You could catch some fish and eat, and then that's it. You can keep doing that, and that's just kind of extracting what you need in the short term from the river. But the river is also a source of power. But instead of just extracting from the inflow and outflow what you need in the short term, you could put, say, a water mill on there, right? You could generate electric power, and the water is still flowing in and it's still flowing out. But in the meantime, you're able to pull power from that. And so that might be the fact that as water flows in, as capital flows into your life, you put some of it into a machine that can generate more, right? So that could be investing, right? Now, if you just take money that comes in, put it into an investment and allow that power to be generated, that's certainly better as far as your overall net picture than just pulling fish out of the river, like just pulling resources out on a one-off times, right? Instead of that one-off usage, you build a system that generates more power that you can do more things than just pulling out a resource from the river. Don't get too hung up on these analogies. I'm just sort of spitballing here, but the other thing you could do, and this is where if I had to compare, I'd say like the paycheck to paycheck American is just the water flows in, they take some resources out, they pay their rent, they pay their bills, they eat, and the water that's just part of the flow out, right? That's the average kind of lower class or even middle class, but like paycheck to paycheck, not much to show at the end of the month, right? I'd say the average person working with financial planner is in that second stage there, where you're actually generating power beyond just the water that's flowing through. It's like, yes, the water is flowing out, but you're still capturing and creating value from that water beyond simply just one-time uses of resources. And where we want to get to, if I'm going to continue with this loose analogy, is why not if you could build a dam on the property to where you control all of the outflow. Not only do you create power, but you also harness a lot more. You have that potential energy and you get to release it on your own terms. Now, loosely, this looks like having a filtering and a collection mechanism for your capital as it flows in. And that's where we believe this asset, this whole life contract that we use, and the whole premise of Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, right here. Normally it's up there on my shelf, but I got it for reference with me today. Like that is what I would consider building a dam, controlling the inflow and harnessing that potential energy. So if we just think about like banking exists and it's already happening in your life. We use a bank. I'm not starting a bank. I'm not replacing USAA as the bank, the checking account that I use. To me, that's a pass-through entity, right? I get uncomfortable if there's even just a little bit amount of money sitting in a checking account because I don't need it in there. It doesn't do anything for me there. That's the lowest quality of savings dollars that I could have. But banking already exists. It's already happening in your life. And so someone like the bank is utilizing your capital. That's actively happening right now. If you don't know exactly where your capital is and who's using it and how they're using it, it's happening whether you know it or not. And so if we can kind of like clean slate in your mind and we think, all right, someone is banking with my capital right now. What are the options for that role? And so that role can be done, that function can be done because it already is being done. So if it's not you, it's somebody else. There's no other scenario here. If you have any capital at all, like unless you are paycheck to paycheck, you have no assets, you have no savings, like outside of that, someone is doing what I'm talking about here with your capital. It's either you or somebody else. And if you don't know who it is, it's definitely not you. So for all of the pushback about like this can't work, what about this? What about the break even? All these concerns, these conversations that we have, and people that can't get past the fact that we use the tool of life insurance for this process, you're just you're outsourcing someone else to retain that. And so separate the process from the product, separate banking from the tool that we like to use. That tool is the best fit when you think about the features that it has. When we talk about the report card of an asset, every dollar is, if you measure it on a list of attributes, the whole life insurance cash value and death benefit, like what you get from the asset of the whole life, stands up better than anything for what we're trying to do. It is not the best investment. It is not the most return on your premium dollars in the form of death benefit. That would be term. How do we get the very least for the most, right? But there's restrictions on that, right? It's temporary. And so for what we're trying to do, we're trying to optimize and solve this banking process solution. We want to figure out what are banks doing and how are they doing it? How are they doing it with our money specifically? So if there is an alternative way that you can take that, why would you not want to explore that? And again, don't get hung up on the fact that we're talking about life insurance. Someone said you're always going to pay for life insurance either through premium dollars or through lost retirement income. I want to say that was Bob Castellone from the Leap System. I think that was in his book. But you're either paying premium or the idea of self-insuring, you're going to be paying for that down the road. So when we understand, if you look at Wade Pfau and Tom Wall's work about, well, also an Ernst & Young study, the idea of using life insurance to supplement your retirement plan makes it so much more robust and makes those long-term returns so much better. But again, that's the product side of it. We're just talking about the process of banking. So I'm going to switch over to Nelson Nash's book here. I'm just going to read a little bit and I'll kind of talk through as I'm going. But this is page 21. This is page 17 where Nelson talks about the problem. This is becoming your own banker. He said, several years ago, I did a good bit of study on the spending habits of American families. Since that time, I've kept an eye on the figures and the proportion of income allocated to each category. This is in 2000, by the way. This seems to be the current situation, which doesn't seem to change all that much. I build scenarios around the all-American family because I don't want people to think that you have to be rich to create a banking system that can handle all your needs for finance. This young man is 29 years old and is making $28,500 per year after taxes. Again, this is 2000, so these numbers are not going to sound accurate to what you would expect right now for a 29-year-old, but percentages, these numbers are still spot on. 20% is spent on transportation, 30% is spent on housing, 45% is spent on living, clothes, groceries, contributions to religious and charitable causes, boat payments, casualty insurance, vacations, etc. Many of these items are financed by charge cards or banknotes. The balance is financed by paying cash for them, and thus giving up interest that could be earned otherwise. He is saving less than 5% of disposable income. That number still holds. The number is 4.6 right now. But to be as generous as possible, let's assume that he is saving 10% and only spending 40% on living expenses. This is giving him every benefit of the doubt on the matter. Just remember, the real situation is at least twice as bad as what will be depicted. So that's still like, this was 26 years ago, and the savings rate is still sub 5%. But he's going to give him 10%. The problem is that all these items are financed by other banking organizations. An automobile financing package for this hypothetical person is $10,500 for 48 months with an interest rate of at least 8.5%, payments of $260 per month. Again, 2000 numbers. But if you check with a sales manager of an automobile agency, you'll find that 95% of the cars that are traded in are not paid for. This means at the end of 30 months, if the car is traded, 21% of every dollar of every payment dollar is interest. If he goes the full 4 years, the portion of every payment made is still 20%. This means that the interest portion of every dollar spent is perpetual. It never seems to dawn that the volume of interest is the real issue, not the annual percentage rate. For a real thrill, go to the sales manager of the high-priced cars and ask him what percent of the cars that leave their lot are leased. The answer will probably be 75% or more. So what he's saying is that you might have, in this case, an 8% interest rate, but you're paying in volume of your total output, your 20% of that total output is going to interest. It's even worse in a mortgage, so he's going to get to that next. Again, temper your expectations for the numbers to 25 years ago. Now let's move to the housing situation. This young man can qualify for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage in the amount of $93,000 at a fixed rate of 7% with payments, $618 a month, $2,500 closing cost. The problem is that within 5 years, he will move to another city across town or refinance the mortgage. Something happens to a mortgage within 5 years, including closing costs and interest paid out during these 60 months. He had paid $39,000, but only $5,400 has gone to reduce the loan. I'm chopping off the digits beyond the hundreds here just for simplicity. This means that $34,000 has gone to interest and closing costs. So check that. You've spent just shy of 40 grand and 34 of it went to interest and closing costs. Divide that amount paid into the interest and closing costs, and you find that 86% of every dollar out goes to the cost of financing. If he sells the house in less than 5 years, it is worse. This proportion never gets any better because he takes on a new mortgage and starts all over again. He thinks that he's buying a house, but all he's really doing is making the wheels of the banking business and the real estate business in that order turn. I'll pause here because just thinking about the mortgage mechanics, if you really want to get angry, if you've never looked at the front-loaded interest curve of a mortgage, and that is accurate there, 5 years in, you've only paid for a small fraction of the equity. The large, close to 80% of that money has gone to the bank in the form of interest. And so that might seem unfair, but we got to think a bank is giving us a 30-year fixed rate, right? So they're saying 3 decades from now. This book was written in 2000, and you can see the numbers that we're talking about here. We haven't even gotten 30 years since this book was written, right? That's a long time. So look at what happens. Like the fact that we look at these numbers, $93,000 for a house, that's crazy. $10,000 for a car, that's crazy. Well, yeah, look at what they are now. And so a bank in this time, when this is written, the day this book is published in 2000, has to commit to a time frame that we haven't even seen yet, right? We still have 4 more years until this book is 30 years old. That's how long the average mortgage is. So from a bank's perspective, when you are locking in 3 decades worth of payments, all you have to go on is what are the rates at right now? What's the long, like we have the treasury bills, which are short term, the notes, which are medium term, and the bonds, which are long term. So treasury bonds give us the best indication of what the market thinks the interest rate will be in the future. But going back to 2000 is almost, it's like pointless at this point, right? Like just thinking about what rates might have been, what the Fed was doing in 2000, like all of that is ancient history in monetary terms as far as anything that matters today. And so conversely today, a 30-year mortgage going in place in 2026, I mean, think how long they have to project. And they would look back 30 years and think, what's happening to the dollar since then? And so it's understandable why they don't want to wait 30 years. Because if you think about a car, how that's amortized across 5 years, every payment, whether it's the first or the last, the first or the 60th payment, the same percentage of that payment goes to interest, right? Because it's a 5-year term. It's a lot more predictable. But they're not going to do that. They don't want to make $20, $50, $6 in the same proportion as they're making $20, $26, right? Or in this mortgage, like just that should blow your mind. And that should, I think, hopefully help you understand a little bit why they front load it. Like that mortgage is still in force that was taken out the day that this book was published. It still has not been paid off yet, right? That was pre 9/11, pre Great Financial Crisis, like everything that's happened since then with the money, with the US dollar, like that mortgage is still being paid off. And so we can give them a little bit of a break when we think about the fact that the amount of equity you have 5 years in is basically nothing. And if we look at the volume of interest there, 5 years in, like you said, about 86% of what you've paid is the financing. Now, even over the course of the full 30 years, it's still much more than the rate, your interest rate. So in this case, well, I'll switch to an example of to put a little meat on the bones here. when I did my thesis in grad school, it was for the Central Bank of Ireland, and it was on improving mortgage disclosures. And so they wanted to convey on the disclosure of a mortgage for consumers how to think about the interest rate and the volume of interest. It was interesting. It was kind of cool that that was my thesis before learning about this. But some numbers that stood out to me at the time when I was writing my thesis, it was 4% was the going rate. And so the 13-year mark in a 4% mortgage is when your monthly payment, where the component of that goes to principal is more than the component that goes to interest. For the first 12 years, just shy of 13 years, every monthly payment you make goes more to interest than it does to principal. That's crazy. And it takes 20 years, month 231, 20 years before you've cut your principal in half. Think about that. 20 out of the 30 years. You've gone 2 decades and you've cut your principal in half. That's how enormous the volume of interest is. And again, you're compensating them for the fact that they're committing to something for 3 decades. But people never think about that because all it comes down to is at the time of purchase, what is the monthly payment that I can afford? As rates go up, that monthly payment gets me less house. The same, say, $3,000 a month means less house if more of it has to go to interest. But at the end of the day, a 4% and a 6% interest rate, it is an enormous difference in the total volume of interest paid. But even at 4%, like you're close to doubling the cost of of the house that you're actually paying for. You buy a $500,000 house, you're paying close to $1 million at a 4% mortgage. Not quite, probably something like 850,000. I'd have to check, but you're paying nearly double at 4% interest. Certainly, right now at the 6 highs that we're at, you're paying easily double the cost of the closing cost of your house. Or sorry, not the closing cost, but the actual like closing price, the list price of your house in interest to the bank. And so how could we take advantage of that? So we're going to go back to Nelson here. So he said 86% of every dollar goes to the cost of financing. In the next segment of his spending pattern, the living expenses, you'll find that the interest on his boat payments, credit card interest, plus the cost of casualty insurance on automobiles, etc., will rival in volume the interest he is paying on the 2 automobiles. Now add up all the interest he's paying out, and you'll find that 34.5 cents of every disposable dollar is paid out in interest. 34.5%. For the average all-American male, this proportion never changes. Let's assume that he's trying to save 10% of his disposable income, which is twice the average savings rate in America. This still holds. That means that we have a 3.45 to 1 ratio of interest paid out as compared to savings. If you'll get this young man together with his peers at a coffee break or some such gathering and have one of them suggest that they discuss financial matters, I can predict what they will talk about, getting a high rate of return on the portion they are saving. Meanwhile, every participant in the conversation is doing the above, which is that 34.5% going to interest. What a tragedy, but that is how they have learned to conduct their financial affairs. All of this reminds me of a phenomenon in the airplane world. I've been flying as a pilot since 1947, and I learned early on that you could not fly an airplane through a vacuum. It must go through an environment. We've all seen the weather maps with the highs and lows. In the northern hemispheres, the highs turn clockwise. A large one can cover 75% or more of the U.S. So picture this situation. You're in Birmingham, Alabama with an airplane that can fly 100 miles per hour, and your destination is Chicago. The only problem is that you have a headwind of 345 miles per hour. Think about that, 345 miles per hour headwind on a 100 mile per hour plane. He's using those numbers because that's the percentage rates we're talking about, right? Regardless of what your airspeed indicator says, your plane is moving towards Miami at 245 miles an hour. You're going backwards. If you want to get to Chicago, it's a very good time to get your airplane on the ground quickly. Have some patience and the air mass will move on. They always do. When the highs get directly over the top of you, there's no headwind. You are now covering the ground at 100 miles per hour. And now the arrival syndrome comes into play. You can conclude that you just can't do any better than this. This is the ultimate situation. Nonsense. Have more patience, and the air mass will continue to move on. Now you have a tailwind of 345 miles per hour. Plus your airplane is moving at a speed of 100 miles an hour. Your ground speed, your speed over the ground, is 445 miles an hour. That's impressive. But you see, there's much more impressive than most people think. Everything you do in the financial world is compared to what everyone else is doing. 95% of the American public is doing the equivalent of flying with a 345 mile per hour headwind. If you have a 345 mile per hour tailwind, the difference between you and them is twice the wind. That's a difference of 690 miles per hour. So it's the idea of removing that drag. If you're paying 34.5% of every dollar to interest, No matter what you're doing with your investments, you're not going to get ahead of that. The same way that if someone has credit card debt, for instance, and they're trying to save for retirement, it's like you need to cut the credit card debt out now because you're going to keep moving backwards. Most people in this situation concentrate all their attention trying to make the plane go 105 miles per hour. They would do well to spend their energy instead on controlling the environment in which they fly. You can't do that in the airplane world, but you can in the financial world. You can do it by controlling the banking equation as it relates to you. That's what this book is about, creating a perpetual tailwind to everything you do in the financial world. Somehow or another, it never dawns on most financial gurus that you can control the financial environment in which you operate. Perhaps it is caused by lack of imagination, but whatever the cause, learning to control it is the most profitable thing you can do over a lifetime. So, setting the stage there, we're talking about that all-American male he's talking about. That is someone who is currently paying out the nose to another bank, another institution. Someone else is profiting from the banking function, from collecting those interest payments. Now, that is what we're trying to do here. Again, we're not starting a bank, but when we talk about the banking function, it's just understanding the flow in and the flow out. Banks do this flawlessly. We do it poorly. And so, do you want to operate your finances like a bank, or do you want to operate your finances like the average American? Why don't we treat our money the way that the bank treats theirs? Like, a bank would never invest money without insurance and collateral. They would never do that. Like, if I went to the bank and said I want to get a loan to buy stocks, they're not going to loan me that money, right? There's no insurance, there's no collateral there. When we make these decisions, we are not acting as a bank, we're acting as the average American. So let's treat our capital the same way that the bank treats theirs. So, do you have are you working with someone? If they are teaching you these concepts, then you have a chance of getting ahead of this. But you're not going to surmount a 34.5% headwind, even with a 10% savings rate. It's just not going to work. You're going to be moving backwards. Our friend Nate Dean made a great analogy, and he said that basically, if money's going to flow through your life, why not install a filter and make it better? And I really like that idea because, again, it's not that money doesn't flow out, but just it's a system for capturing and corralling it and understanding where dollars can be allocated for their best possible usage. All right, so I'm going to go back to Nelson here. This is page 19. Creating a bank like the ones you already know about. And here he talks about the cost of actually setting up a bank. If you're going to create a bank like the ones you already know about, there are a number of steps you must go through. Like the grocery store business we discussed earlier, you must first study the business so you have a firm grip on what it is all about and feel you can run such a business. Without this confidence, you're fighting a lost cause. It's a jungle out there. Next, you must get some capital, money, and it better be in the order of $20 million or more. Again, this is back in 2000. This money must sit in some other bank in a very liquid form, that is, earning a very low interest rate. Then you go to the banking commissioner's office and apply for a bank charter. Bear in mind that the commissioner doesn't hand out charters indiscriminately. The chance of your getting one at this point is probably less than 100 to 1. There are a lot of other folks that would like to be bankers. You must wait your turn. Whenever I hear the word commissioner, I always think of an iceberg. Only 10% appears above the water. There is a lot going on that is unseen. At this point, you need to use your imagination. The bottom line is that you are going to spend a lot of time and money in this phase of creating your bank. Years are likely to have passed before you can finally win the coveted charter. In the meantime, you have probably gone through the part about a good location and suitable building. This, too, is at considerable expense. Now you are finally in business as a bank. You must make your own bank known by lots of advertising and inducing people to make deposits to your bank. Why do you think they would deposit their money with your bank when they could easily do business with established banks that have been there for years? You're going to have to pay them something better than they're getting at their current banking connection. Do you notice thus far that you've been paying out money for years in getting this business established? In his book, Paper Money, author Adam Smith has this to say: a banker cannot make a loan unless he has a deposit. They lend the money somebody else has left there. Later on in the book, he goes on to explain when you start up a bank, you have to put in some capital. Then you get some deposits. Then you lend the deposits. In a proper bank, these three items bear a prudent relation to one another. If you are a little country bank with a capital of $100,000, it would be very imprudent of you to loan Brazil $50 million. So you want a prudent relationship between the capital and the assets, which is to say the loans on the books and between the loans and the deposits. In the Western countries, the financial agents of the government are there with a definition of prudence. Yes, there are financial agents of the government with the definition of prudence, but they still did not preclude massive bank failures in the mid-1980s in America. During this time, the Asian bank community could do no wrong. They were hailed as financial geniuses. Now, there are bank failures in Asia that are much greater than those that occurred in the U.S. course, again, this is before the Great Financial Crisis. My point is that we're not dealing here with man-made laws. They have failed miserably. We are dealing with relations among people, i.e. God-made laws. You disobey them at your peril. Does all this sound somewhat like the grocery store example that you read about earlier? If the owner and his family take groceries out the back door without paying for them, he'll probably go bankrupt. It happens in the banking business too. Remember this, because in the banking system I'm going to tell you about, you can also destroy it by not obeying the basic rules of banking. Loans have to be paid back or you can kill the business. It's up to you. Don't try to blame others when it happens. You must admit that getting into the business this way is very costly and time consuming. It will be a long time before you show a profit, probably as much as 10 years. But it must be extremely profitable over the long haul for people to go through the gory mess you've just read about. There is a much easier way to accomplish the creation of your own banking system, and the mechanism has been around for over 200 years. It's tried and true. It is called participating, i.e., dividend paying, whole life insurance. The problem is that very few people know how the banking business works, including the home office folks in the life insurance company. This part coming up is key here, and this is where we can just tack on to what's already happening, and we can achieve these results without going through this whole decade-long process to set up a bank. At this point, it will help if you understand what is meant by the word cogeneration. It is a term used in the production of electrical power. As most everyone knows, electrical power is produced in plants using fossil fuels, coal and petroleum products, nuclear fuels, or water to turn turbines. But there is another source of electrical power that is significant: the wood product plants, sawmills, and paper mills. Trees are harvested for the wood they contain, but the bark on the outside of the tree and the sawdust from sawing lumber has little economic value, but they make a very good fire. This source of heat can do the same thing that fossil fuels do to turn dynamos to produce electricity. Every sawmill of significant size and all paper mills have a cogeneration plant to make their own electricity. Imagine that you could own a paper mill and that your cogeneration plant can produce 125% of your mill's need for electric power. What do you do with the surplus power? Yes, you can sell it, but do you erect power line distributions? Get a sales force, ask potential customers if they would like to buy power from you instead of their customary power supplier? Heavens no, you understand how power distribution systems all work and simply tie into the established system and sell them the power. It is much more efficient than trying to do it any other way. Creating your own banking system through the use of dividend-paying life insurance is much like cogeneration. All the ingredients are already there in place. All you have to do is understand what is going on in an insurance plan and tap into that system. So the idea, like we talk about banking a lot, and I think on the compliance side of companies, especially the insurance companies that we work with, all get really skittish when we talk about banking because there are regulations around banking, right? Very clearly, we are not starting a bank. We are not making deposits to a bank. We are putting in force a life insurance contract and paying premiums to that contract. Not banking, right? The book is called Becoming Your Own Banker, but what's more important in the title than banker is becoming. It's just understanding, becoming your own banker, understanding these principles and trying to mimic what a bank does. If there is another system that teaches you or that tries to help you understand what a bank does, what the banking function is, and then provides a framework for replicating that and taking that, kind of co-generating that power as you just talked about. If there's another system that does that you could call it the same thing. It doesn't matter what the title is. If the title, if like the term IBC it seems weird to you, then ignore it. Like it doesn't matter what you call it. The banking function exists. It's happening to your capital, whether you're aware of it or not, and someone is currently profiting from it. We want to understand that, and we want to take control of that and kind of harness that for our own benefit. All right, so getting back to the beginning, if a conversation that we've had, or if you've heard us talking or other people talking, if the idea that the product that best facilitates this process, if the impediment for you is that it is life insurance, I really think you owe it to yourself to actually explore the mechanics of a policy and how this asset works. Because if you look up how people describe it in the financial planning world, which I'm getting a firsthand taste of right now, going through all these licensing exams and coursework, like it's very understandable why the body of knowledge on life insurance among financial planners is so bad. Because some of the things that are said are straight up not true, like actuarially don't make sense. And the regulations only work one way. Like if you're not a registered, and if you're not an RIA, if you don't have a CFP, like giving it financial advice is a very walled off, like you have to be in the club to quote give financial advice, right? But in the opposite direction, people without a life license can give life insurance advice because it doesn't wall itself off and put these like branded trademarks around it in the same way. I mean, there is the CLU designation, but you don't need a CLU designation to give life insurance advice. Life insurance is just kind of considered a supplementary, nice to have thing by the financial planning industry. The barrier to entry is very low there as far as knowledge goes. And so they become very well versed in one side of their field. And I think it's greatly missing the an equally, and I would argue more valuable element of a financial strategy. So financial advisors can give advice on life insurance that they're not qualified to give because their training doesn't include it. The training is woefully deficient. But conversely, an expert in life insurance has to tread lightly in giving financial advice, which is why I'm just going to bridge that gap and not have to worry, like be able to give both sides of it. And that's what I'm working on right now. Not because I really care about doing assets under management, but because I want to know exactly where this information is coming from because it's so consistently bad. We have one financial advisor, Scott Osborne, who we've interviewed a couple times on the show we work with. When people are like, hey, I just want a financial advisor, particularly airline pilots. He's an expert with airline compensation and getting you set up there. If you want a CFP, if you want a financial advisor, I will recommend you to Scott Osborne all day because he's one of the very few I've ever met that actually gets this and understands its value and doesn't just treat it as, oh, it's nice to have, get a little bit for your wife, and then hopefully when it expires, you've got enough money that you can self-insure. Like self-insurance is a myth. You can't self-insure. So all that to say, don't be scared off by the fact that the product we use is life insurance. It is so much, what we're trying to do is so much more than that. We're trying to put this framework in place that means that if you are in that metaphorical plane that's going down, you're not worried about what's going to happen when you hit the ground. You're not worried about your wife. And so I know that's kind of this sort of like a scattered episode because I've really just been thinking about the banking function and having conversations recently where that has been just a source of confusion enough that I want to just put it out there that we're not what we mean when we talk about the banking function, generally what the banking function is. I'll do one more quick example that we always talk about. If you are getting 3% in a high yield savings account and someone else is taking a car loan from the same bank at 6%, in a very simplified version, the bank is lending your money that they're paying you 3 on to someone else, and that someone else is paying them 6%. So they had no capital requirement there. Again, this is glossing over a lot of depth to the banking process, but just simply speaking, I put $100 in the bank and they pay me 3%. Someone else borrows $100 to purchase a car at 6%. They give them my money and then they collect twice from them what they're getting from me, right? Every $3 they pay me, they collect 6 from the other individual. The spread there is 3%, but their rate of return on what they're paying me, the 3%, their rate of return is 100% on that, right? Because they get recouped the 3 and then they make another 3 on top of that. That's 100% rate of return, right? And so that's very simply put, that's just what we're trying to do. So just keep in mind, if that's you, that you've ever just been turned off by the branding of IBC, the talk of becoming your own banker, are we starting a bank, and the fact that this product is life insurance. I didn't go into the details of the contract, but once you understand the elements of this asset, it's very hard to think the same way and to have this idea of life insurance when you actually understand it. None of those challenges really hold up with full information. I've yet to meet someone that actually can walk through it, understands it, and still has this gut reaction against it, even if it's not a strategy they're going to implement. If they're honest, they'll say, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. I can't get over XYZ and I'd rather do ABC. But I get what you're talking about. This is not the ripoff I thought it was. This is not just some marketing scheme. I understand there's a process. There is this idea of banking that we want to try to put a dam on the inflow and outflow and try to control that. And I understand, now that I understand this asset better, that this best facilitates it. So it's the best option, it's the best solution that we can come up with. And if you can come up with a better one, we would love to hear about it too. Because if there's a better option for this, if we set that taking over the banking function is a valid goal, and I hold that it is, if you can present me a more efficient option, if you can present me an asset that'll do that with better tax performance, better guarantees, better liquidity, all these factors we talk about, if there is a solution that is better than this, please let us know. We will pivot instantly towards that and learn as much as we can. But until that point, until that time comes, and they'll have to change the tax code greatly for that to happen. They'll have to create new products and strategies that don't exist currently. But if they do, let us know. And so hope that explains a little bit about what we mean when we talk about the banking function. And again, pray for our brother and his family. Just unthinkable. And please, please, please have a conversation with someone who cares and wants to make sure that you are not another GoFundMe. All right, y'all, we'll chat again next week. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Remnant Finance. If you found any value at all in this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend.
Remember, true financial freedom comes from taking control of your personal economy and breaking free from the status quo. So stop being a passenger in your family's financial future.
Boldly take back control of your wealth. Until next time,
this is Brian and Hans signing off.